Stop. Don't cancel her surgery. Ethan Brooks heard the words before he understood who had said them, one hand still holding the elevator door open, the other wrapped around Lily's trembling shoulders as she clutched the hospital folder stamped in red. Surgery canceled. Behind the glass wall, the board flashed B, 417 canceled. A woman in rain-damp scrubs stepped inside, eyes locking on the folder. At the desk, a polished administrator lifted a palm. Sir, policy is policy. Lily whispered, Daddy, did I do something wrong? 3 hours earlier, the private hospital was still half asleep, breathing in fluorescent light and disinfectant. The marble floors of Whitmore Children's Surgical Center shone too brightly for morning, reflecting ceiling panels, rolling carts, and the tired face of a man who had not slept since the night before. Ethan Brooks walked beside his 8-year-old daughter with his security badge still clipped to his dark blue uniform, the metal edge tapping softly against his chest with every step. He had come straight from a night shift across town, his coffee gone cold in a dented thermos, his boots clean but worn at the heels. Lily walked slowly, not because anyone told her to, but because children who have spent too much time in hospitals learn to save their strength. She held the folder with both arms pressed against her chest, as if the papers inside were something alive. A white hospital wristband circled her small wrist. In black ink, someone had written B 417. Every few seconds, Ethan looked down and smiled at her. Not the wide smile of a man without fear, but the quiet kind a father offers when fear has no right to touch his child first. Almost there, bug, he said. Lily nodded, then looked at the elevators ahead. One door was already closing. A woman in pale blue scrubs hurried toward it from the side entrance, rainwater darkening the shoulders of her top, a canvas medical bag hanging from one hand. She looked exhausted, like someone who had crossed more than weather to get there. Ethan could have let the doors close. He could have kept walking. The surgery desk was only 50 feet away, and every minute mattered. But his hand moved, before calculation could. He stepped forward and pressed his palm against the rubber edge. The elevator sighed open. Ma'am, he said, giving her room. The woman stopped, surprised, then gave a small nod. Thank you. Ethan only tipped his head. Lily looked up at the woman's scrubs, then down at the wet footprints she had left on the polished floor. You were in the rain, Lily said softly. The woman's expression changed for half a second, caught by the gentleness of a child who was the one about to be cut open, yet still noticed someone else was cold. I was, she said, but I'm inside now. The doors closed between them, and Ethan guided Lily towards surgical reception. The desk was neat, too neat, with clear plastic sign holders, clipped pens, and a small silver bell no one used. Behind it, a woman in a cream blazer scanned the folder, her smile professional enough to be mistaken for kindness. Ethan watched her fingers pause. Not long, just enough. Then her eyes flicked to the monitor. A red box appeared on the screen. Mr. Brooks, she said, lowering her voice. There seems to be an issue with final assistance clearance. Ethan kept one hand on Lily's shoulder. Her surgery was approved. The woman's smile did not move. It was scheduled. A soft chime sounded from the board behind her. Ethan turned. B 417 prep blinked once, then changed to B 417 canceled. Lily's fingers crushed the edge of the folder, and Ethan noticed the red stamp on the top page was still wet enough to shine under the lights. The red stamp was still glistening when Ethan reached for the folder, but the woman behind the desk slid it back under her palm as if paper could outrank a father. Mr. Brooks, please lower your voice. I didn't raise it. We're trying to help. Then help her. The words came out quiet, but the space around them tightened. Lily stood beside him in her small cardigan, her hospital wristband turned outward, B 417 printed in black like a number waiting to be erased. The administrator in the cream blazer glanced at Ethan's dark blue security uniform, then at the worn radio clipped to his belt, then at his boots. Her eyes did not stay there long, but they stayed long. Enough. Final assistance clearance has not posted, she said, smoothing the folder with 2 fingers. Without that clearance, the surgical team cannot proceed. Ethan looked past her to the board. B417 canceled burned red against the pale morning light. Her doctor said today mattered. Her doctor does not manage financial eligibility. The sentence was soft, clean, and cruel in the way only polished sentences can be. A printer hummed behind the desk. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rattled over a floor seam. The air smelled like antiseptic, warmed plastic, and rain drying off coats near the entrance. Ethan crouched beside Lily before anyone could see her face break. He pulled the top flap of the folder down just enough to hide the word unpaid from her view. "You didn't do anything wrong," he whispered. "This is grown-up paperwork. Okay?" Lily nodded, but her eyes stayed on the red board. "Am I still going to the sleepy room?" Ethan swallowed once. "I'm going to ask them to check again." The administrator's smile thinned. "Mr. Brooks, repeated questions will not change the status. One question might. The fund is exhausted. Can you show me that?" Her hand paused on the mouse, only for a heartbeat. Then she turned slightly toward a second monitor Ethan could not see. "That information is internal." From the hallway, the woman in scrubs had stepped out of the elevator and stopped near a row of potted palms. Rain still clung to the hem of her scrub pants. She did not interrupt. She did not announce herself. She watched the way Ethan kept his body between Lily and the desk, not like a man preparing to fight, but like a father trying to keep shame from landing on his child. Marla Voss, the surgical reception manager, arrived with a tablet pressed to her chest. Her badge swung from a silver chain. "Is there a problem here?" "The Brooks file," the desk clerk said. "Assistance issue." Marla's face softened into something practiced. "Mr. Brooks, I understand this is emotional." "It's medical," Ethan said. "She's 8. Marla inhaled as if patience itself were part of her job description. "We do not cancel pediatric procedures lightly." Ethan looked at the wet, red stamp again. "But you already did." A couple seated nearby lowered their voices. A nurse passing through slowed, then moved on. Lily pressed closer to Ethan's leg, holding his old security badge in one hand now, rubbing her thumb across the scratched plastic. Marla tapped the tablet and turned it away before the screen fully loaded. But Ethan saw one line before it disappeared. Manual hold. Not insufficient funds. Not denied. Manual hold. His gaze lifted, not angry, only sharper. "I thought you said the fund was exhausted." Marla's smile stayed in place, but her fingers tightened around the tablet. "That is the practical meaning, Mr. Brooks." Behind the potted palms, Dr. Claire Whitmore looked down at the folder, then back at Marla's hand covering the screen, and for the first time that morning, the woman in scrubs stopped looking tired. Dr. Claire Whitmore watched Marla's fingers tighten over the tablet, but Ethan Brooks did not push. He did not grab for the screen. He did not raise his voice to prove he loved his daughter. He simply looked down at Lily, saw her rubbing his scratched security badge like a worry stone, and softened his face before fear could teach her the wrong lesson. "Stay right here where I can see you, bug." Lily nodded, her small knees pressed together on the plastic chair. The red-stamped folder rested across her lap, too large for her arms. Its corner bent where she had held it too tightly. Then, from 3 seats away, a young mother stood too fast with a newborn carrier in one hand and a diaper bag in the other. The bag slipped. Bottles rolled across the floor. A stack of hospital papers scattered under the reception counter like white leaves. No one moved at first. Marla glanced over, irritated by the interruption. "Ma'am, please keep the walkway clear." The mother flushed red. "I'm sorry. They told me radiology, but this says surgical intake, and I don't know where." Her voice cracked. Ethan was already bending down. His back must have ached from the night shift, and his stomach was hollow from coffee instead of breakfast. But his hands moved carefully, gathering papers by date, tapping the edges straight against his palm. He caught one baby bottle before it rolled beneath a cartwheel, wiped the nipple with a clean tissue from his pocket, and placed it back into the side pouch without making the mother feel watched. "Radiology is past the chapel, left at the blue elevators," he said. "The signs turn confusing after the gift shop." The mother blinked. "You work here?" Ethan gave a small, tired smile. No, ma'am. I just get lost in hospitals a lot. Lily looked up at that, and something flickered across her face. A memory of late nights, vending machine dinners, and her father reading hallway maps like they were bedtime stories. Ethan reached under the counter for the last loose sheet. It had landed face down near the wheel of Marla's chair. As he lifted it, his thumb brushed a printed line. CF Kids, 12 Charity Intake. The same code sat faintly on the back of Lily's folder, half hidden beneath the red cancellation stamp and the crease from Lily's hand. Ethan did not know what it meant. He only knew when numbers repeated in places where people said nothing was connected. A father learned to remember them. He slid the paper back into the mother's stack without comment. You'll want to keep this one on top, he said gently. They ask for it twice. Marla gave a thin laugh through her nose. Mr. Brooks, this is really not the time to become the lobby volunteer. Ethan straightened slowly. No, ma'am, he said. It's the time to make sure nobody else loses their place. The sentence landed quietly, almost too quietly. But Claire heard it. So did Naomi Price, the head nurse stepping out from the corridor with a chart tucked under her arm. The young mother whispered thank you and hurried away, pressing the papers to her chest. Ethan returned to Lily and pulled her cardigan sleeve down over the cold plastic edge of her wristband so it would not rub her skin. Lily leaned close and whispered, Daddy, that baby was tiny. Yeah, he said. Tiny people still count. Claire's eyes moved from Ethan's hands to the red-stamped folder, then to the form disappearing down the hallway in the young mother's arms, and the tiredness in her face changed into something sharper. Because the small kindness Ethan had just offered had carried away the first loose thread of a much larger lie. The young mother disappeared past the chapel corridor with the CF Kids, 12 form pressed to her chest, and Marla Voss watched her go as if a loose page had just walked out of a locked drawer. Mr. Brooks, she said, sharper now beneath the polite surface. You cannot advise other families on hospital process. Ethan had already returned to Lily's side. He did not defend himself. He only took the red-stamped folder from Lily's lap, turned it so the glare from the fluorescent lights slid across the ink, and asked, Can someone explain why this was canceled before the medical note was finished? The question was so plain it almost sounded harmless. Marla blinked. The desk clerk stopped typing. Even Lily looked up. Ethan pointed, not with accusation, but with one grease-roughened finger held just above the paper so he would not smudge it. This says canceled at 6:12. He looked at the printed anesthesia checklist clipped beneath it. But this note from Dr. Patel was entered at 6:24. The paper made a dry whisper as he lifted the corner. The red stamp still shone wet at the edge, and beneath it, faint but visible, was the code CF Kids 12. The same code from the form he had just handed back to the young mother. Dr. Claire Whitmore stood very still near the potted palms. She had spent years in field hospitals where a wrong timestamp could mean a missed blood type, a delayed airway, a child moved too late. She also knew hospitals made mistakes. Printers lagged. Clerks entered things out of order. Good people clicked the wrong field when phones rang and alarms screamed. She would not convict anyone because a tired father noticed a clock. But she could not ignore the way Marla's hand moved toward the folder too quickly. That is an internal sequencing issue, Marla said. It happens when systems refresh. Ethan lowered the page but kept his palm resting lightly on the folder. Then refresh it again. Sir, please. His voice did not rise. That made the request harder to dismiss. Naomi Price, the head nurse, stepped closer, her shoes silent on the polished floor. She looked at Lily first, not the paperwork, and softened. Sweetheart, are you cold? Lily nodded a little. Ethan reached down and pulled Lily's cardigan tighter around her shoulders. His thumb brushed the white wristband marked B417. Lily whispered, The board turned red after we got here. It was not an accusation. It was a child reporting the only thing she knew. The color changed and everyone got quiet. Marla's smile returned, but now it sat too carefully on her face. Children don't always understand how scheduling works. Ethan's eyes moved to her. She understands red. The hallway seemed to hold its breath. A monitor beeped somewhere behind the double doors. Rain tapped faintly against the high windows, and the scent of wet fabric clung around Claire like a memory from outside. Marla tapped her tablet and angled it away. The Brooks account was flagged for executive financial review. The fund has not cleared. Until it clears, the surgical slot cannot remain active. Claire's eyes narrowed at one phrase. Executive financial review. Not insurance review. Not charity review. Executive. She stepped forward at last, but only enough for her voice to enter the circle. May I see the service log? Marla turned, seeing her as another doctor, perhaps an inconvenient one, perhaps one who had missed the morning briefing. Doctor, this is an administrative matter. Claire nodded once. Then the log will clarify it. Ethan looked at Claire, still unsure whether she was help or another hallway promise waiting to disappear. He did not hand over the folder immediately. He looked down at Lily, then back at the woman in scrubs. If you look, he said quietly, look at the whole thing. Claire accepted that as the only permission that mattered. Marla's jaw tightened. She tapped twice, then brought up a narrow gray window filled with timestamps. For a moment, all anyone could hear was the printer warming behind the desk. There it was, plain and cold under the fluorescent glare. 5:58 a.m., CFO Access, Richard Hale. 14 minutes before the cancellation, 26 minutes before the anesthesia note. Someone from finance had entered Lily Brooks's surgical file. The gray service log stayed on the screen for only a few seconds, but it was enough to change the rhythm of the room. The receptionist stopped reaching for her keyboard. A volunteer pushing a cart of folded blankets slowed without realizing it. Even the steady hum of the air conditioning suddenly seemed louder than the voices around it. Ethan did not speak first. He simply looked at the timestamp again, then at Lily, who had begun tracing circles on the scratched plastic of his security badge with one small finger. She was no longer looking at the red surgery board. She was watching her father instead. Mr. Brooks, Marla Voss said, recovering her polished smile. There's a reasonable explanation for executive access. Financial reviews often begin before medical documentation is complete. Ethan nodded once. Maybe. Marla seemed relieved by the answer. Then he asked one more question. If that's normal, why was her operating room released before the anesthesiologist finished the chart? The silence lasted less than 3 seconds. Felt much longer. Marla glanced toward the desk clerk. The clerk looked at the screen. No one answered immediately. Dr. Claire Whitmore stepped closer, still careful not to overtake the conversation. Would you mind opening the financial authorization window? She asked. Marla hesitated. That's restricted.
I'm credentialed.
It's administrative. Claire's expression remained calm. Then the system can tell us whether the restriction is funding or authorization. Marla tapped reluctantly across the screen. The financial window appeared. Several gray boxes filled the display before a final line resolved into focus. Funds available. Beneath it, in smaller letters, disbursement blocked, CFO override. Claire read the line twice. Ethan read only enough to understand one thing. It says available. Marla answered almost too quickly. Available doesn't mean accessible. Why? Ethan asked. Because executive review protects the integrity of the fund. From children. Marla inhaled softly. From misuse. Ethan looked down at Lily again instead of arguing. She tugged gently on his sleeve. Daddy? Yeah. Does that mean somebody forgot? Ethan rested his hand on her hair. Maybe somebody made a mistake. He chose the gentlest explanation he could give an 8-year-old. Claire noticed that he could have blamed the people in front of them. He could have poured his anger into the room. Instead, he protected his daughter from carrying bitterness she was too young to understand. That told Claire more about the man than anything in his file ever could. Naomi Price, the head nurse, quietly stepped beside Claire. I've never seen that override before, she whispered. Claire did not answer immediately. Her eyes remained fixed on the screen. Then she spoke without looking away. "Don't close this window." Marla's hand froze over the keyboard. "Doctor, there's no reason to alarm anyone. Leave it open. This should really be handled privately." Claire finally turned toward her. "Why?" Marla smiled again, but it had become thinner than paper. "Because people may misunderstand what they're seeing." Ethan said nothing. He simply shifted his position so Lily could lean against him more comfortably. He removed his old security jacket and folded it behind her back to soften the hard plastic chair. Lily smiled for the first time since the red board had changed. "Better?" he asked. She nodded. "Much." Across the lobby, another family glanced toward the reception desk, sensing that something unusual had interrupted the ordinary machinery of the hospital. Nobody spoke above a whisper anymore. Claire reached into the pocket of her rain-damp scrubs and pulled out a small notebook. She copied the exact wording from the screen before anyone could claim it had been displayed incorrectly. Then she quietly turned to Naomi. "Please ask IT to preserve every access log connected to case B-417. Naomi's eyes widened slightly. "Without notifying finance?" Claire closed the notebook. "Especially without notifying finance." At that exact moment, Marla's office phone lit up. She glanced at the caller ID, and for the first time that morning, the practiced composure slipped from her face. She answered immediately, lowering her voice. "Yes, Mr. Hale. They're looking at the override now." "Yes, Mr. Hale. They're looking at the override now." Marla's whisper was meant to vanish into the receiver, but the lobby had gone too quiet to protect it. Ethan heard the name. Claire heard the fear beneath it. Naomi Price heard something else entirely, the kind of panic that comes when a secret stops behaving like paperwork and starts becoming evidence. Marla turned her back halfway, one hand cupped around the phone. "I understand. No, I haven't released anything." "Yes, doctor involvement." She glanced toward Claire, then toward Ethan, as if trying to decide which one was the larger problem. Claire did not move. The screen still showed the line she had copied into her notebook. "Funds available. Disbursement blocked, CFO override." Below it, case B-417 sat frozen in red. Lily Brooks reduced to a status field while Lily herself leaned against her father's folded jacket, watching grown-ups speak in voices that did not sound like healing. Ethan could have said Richard Hale's name out loud. He could have made the whole lobby turn. Instead, he put a hand gently over Lily's ear closest to the desk and lowered his voice. "Don't let them close that screen," he said to Claire. It was not an order. It was a father who had spent years learning that once a door shuts, poor people are told to come back with better questions. Claire looked at him then, not with pity, but with something closer to respect. "I won't." Naomi stepped behind the counter and opened a secondary terminal with her nurse access. "If one override exists," she said, "there may be a queue." Marla turned sharply. "Naomi, that is not your department." Naomi did not raise her eyes. "Children are my department." Her fingers moved quickly. The printer behind her clicked, warmed, then stopped as if even the machine hesitated before what came next. A list appeared on the screen, not long enough to be a database, too long to be a mistake. 23 pediatric charity cases. 11 weeks. Each marked with a version of the same phrase. Deferred pending executive review. Claire's breath changed, small but audible. The rain outside softened against the windows, leaving gray streaks down the glass. On the monitor, the names blurred into initials and case numbers, but the ages remained visible. 6, 9, 4, 11 months. Ethan saw only enough before looking away. There are sights a father does not need to study to understand. "Is Lily still able to have surgery today?" he asked. Naomi looked at him. Claire looked at him. Even Marla looked at him, startled that his first question was not who pays, who apologizes, or who gets blamed. "We don't know yet," Naomi said honestly. Ethan nodded, absorbing the answer like a man taking a hit without stepping back. "Then we find out before we fight about anything else." Claire's hand rested flat on the counter beside Lily's red-stamped folder. "Show me the charity record." Marla snapped the phone down before hanging up properly. Dr. Whitmore, Mr. Hale is asking that this conversation be moved to administration. Not yet. He said the optics could be damaging. The word landed wrong. Optics. It did not belong beside a child in a cardigan holding a hospital wristband. Naomi opened the archived memo attached to the first deferred case. The email header displayed Richard Hale's name. The body was short, clean, and dressed in business language. Delay charity releases until board optics stabilize. Beneath it, another phrase glowed like frost. Minimize charity exposure before quarterly review. Claire read it once, then again, and something old passed behind her eyes. An old grief, an old vow, the memory of why this hospital's charity fund had been created in the first place. She reached into her scrub pocket and pulled out a small access card, worn at the edges, the corner nearly white from years of use. The desk clerk noticed the card and frowned, as if recognizing a logo she had seen on framed plaques upstairs. Claire tucked it back before anyone could ask. Not yet. Evidence first. Ethan saw the movement but said nothing. He only lifted Lily's folder and placed it carefully beside the printed list, aligning the red stamp with the 23 deferred cases. One child had become many. One canceled surgery had become a pattern. Across the desk, Marla's face had gone pale beneath her careful makeup, and down the hall, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime as if the building itself were, making room for what could no longer stay behind closed doors. The elevator doors opened into the same surgical reception lobby where Lily's name had turned red, but now the place felt different, as if the walls themselves knew too many people were listening. Nurses stood near the charting station. Two families sat frozen in plastic chairs. The desk clerk kept her hands folded over the keyboard, afraid to type, afraid not to. Ethan Brooks walked in behind Lily, not ahead of her, one hand resting lightly between her shoulders. He had not become taller. His uniform had not become cleaner. His eyes were still tired from the night shift, but the red-stamped folder in his hand no longer looked like a rejected application. It looked like evidence. Claire Whitmore placed it on the reception counter first. Case B-417, she said. Cancelled at 6:12 a.m. Naomi Price set the printed anesthesia note beside it. Medical note completed at 6:24 a.m. Then Claire laid down the service log. CFO access at 5:58 a.m. Richard Hale arrived before anyone could speak again. His suit charcoal, his tie perfect, his expression carrying the gentle concern of a man trained to look human in front of witnesses. Dr. Whitmore, he said, not quite recognizing danger beneath her scrubs. This should never have become a public scene. Claire did not answer. Richard turned to the room, lowering his voice just enough to sound compassionate. Everyone here wants the child to receive care, but charity funds must be protected from misuse. Temporary holds are standard during review. The words worked for a moment. A few eyes shifted toward Ethan's worn boots, his security badge, the folded jacket behind Lily's back. Richard saw it and pressed gently. Mr. Brooks is understandably emotional, but emotion cannot override policy. Ethan looked down at Lily, who had moved behind his left side and was holding the edge of his sleeve. He did not step forward. He did not defend his bank account. He only said, I'm not asking you to bend rules. I'm asking why you bent them before the doctor finished. The room went still enough for the monitor beeps behind the double doors to sound like distant footsteps. Claire placed the fourth document on the counter, the charity fund bylaws. The page was old, copied too many times, its corners softened, but the line in the middle was clear. Medical urgency overrides financial review. Richard's eyes flicked down, then away. That language must be read in administrative context. Naomi set the email printout beside it. Delay charity releases until board optics stabilize. Minimize charity exposure before quarterly review. Richard's mouth tightened for the first time. That memo is being taken out of context. 23 children, Naomi said, voice low. All deferred under the same hold. Richard's kindness hardened around the edges. I paused the fund to protect the institution. The sentence escaped cleanly, professionally, almost proudly. Then he heard it himself. Claire slowly lifted her pen and wrote the words down on the back of the service log. Ethan closed his eyes for half a second, not in triumph, but grief. Lily tugged his sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, did he pause me too?" Ethan knelt just enough to meet her eyes. "He doesn't get to decide what you're worth." Claire's hand moved to the pocket of her rain-damp scrubs, where the worn access card waited, and every face in the lobby turned as she began to pull it out. Claire pulled the worn access card from her scrub pocket and placed it on the counter beside Lily's red-stamped folder. For one breath, it looked like nothing more than old plastic with a faded hospital logo. Then Naomi read the name aloud, and her voice broke the room open. Dr. Claire Whitmore, co-founder. Richard Hale's face did not collapse all at once. It tightened in small places first, the corner of his mouth, the muscle beside his jaw, the fingers curled around his pen. Claire turned the charity bylaws so everyone could see the signature at the bottom. Her signature, the same name printed on the old access card, the same name engraved on the founding plaque upstairs that most employees passed every day without reading. CF Kids 12 was created so urgent pediatric care could not be stopped by financial review, she said. Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. The bylaws state it plainly. Medical urgency overrides financial review. Richard reached for the page, then stopped when Naomi's hand moved over it first. "Claire," he said, suddenly using her first name as if familiarity could rebuild authority. "This is an unfortunate misunderstanding of internal safeguards." Claire looked at the service log. 5:58 a.m., your access. She looked at Lily's folder. 6:12 a.m., cancellation. She looked at the anesthesia note. 6:24 a.m., medical clearance entered after finance had already removed her from the schedule. Then she placed the email on top. Delay charity releases until board optics stabilize. The paper made a small sound against the counter, soft as a leaf, final as a gavel. "And here," she said, "your stated reason." The lobby went quiet in layers. First the whispers died near the chairs. Then the desk clerk stopped breathing through her mouth. Then the printer behind reception clicked once and fell silent. Even the automatic doors seemed to pause before opening to the rainy morning outside. Richard's pen slipped from his fingers and tapped against the tile. No one bent to pick it up. On the surgery board, B for 17 still glowed red, stubborn and cruel, until Claire turned to the desk clerk. "Restore the fund access." The clerk looked at Richard. Claire's voice sharpened by 1 degree. Not his approval. "Mine." Naomi stepped beside the clerk and entered the override reversal. Richard swallowed. "This is not proper chain of command." Claire did not look away from the screen. Neither was erasing a child before her doctor finished the chart. Ethan stood with Lily behind him, one hand resting on her shoulder. He did not smile. He did not stare Richard down. He only lowered himself to Lily's height and tied the loose lace on her small sneaker, fingers steady despite the tremor in his breath. Lily held his security badge against her chest. "Daddy?" she whispered. "Am I going now?" Ethan looked up at the board just as the red field blinked. Once, twice. Then B 417 cancelled disappeared and became B 417 active. "Prep now." The change washed across the lobby like light through storm glass. Nobody cheered. Nobody clapped. The silence was too full for that. A nurse covered her mouth. Marla Voss lowered her eyes. Richard Hale stared at the screen as if it had betrayed him, though it had only remembered the truth. Claire turned to Naomi. "Suspend Mr. Hale's access to CF Kids 12. Preserve every log. Notify surgical board that case B 417 is active under founding authority." Naomi nodded, already moving. Then Claire faced Ethan, and for the first time since the elevator, the woman in scrubs looked less like a stranger and more like someone carrying a promise she had almost lost. "Mr. Brooks," she said softly, "your daughter's team is ready." Ethan rose slowly, taking Lily's hand. He passed the folder back across the counter, not like a weapon, but like a burden finally returned to the people who should have carried it. And as the double doors opened for Lily, the question left in the silence was not who had won, but what Ethan Brooks would do now that the whole room finally saw him. The double doors closed behind Lily, and the lobby did not break into applause. It emptied slowly, respectfully, like people leaving a church after hearing something true. Naomi Price moved with quiet urgency, preserving access logs, printing audit notices, and escorting Richard Hale away from the fund terminal while his perfect tie sat crooked for the first time that morning. Marla Voss remained behind the counter, pale and still, staring at the place where Lily's red folder had been. Claire did not let the moment become theater. She ordered an independent audit of all 23 deferred pediatric cases, restored CF, kids, 12 under emergency protection, and assigned Naomi to contact every family before the day ended. Then the waiting began. Ethan sat in a corner chair with his elbows on his knees, his old security badge in both hands now that Lily had given it back before surgery. The plastic was warm from her fingers. The scratched nameplate no longer looked like proof that he was small. It looked like proof that he had stood where he was needed and stayed. Hours passed in the soft machinery of hospital time. Wheels over tile, distant intercoms, rainwater dripping from umbrellas near the door, coffee cooling untouched in paper cups. Claire came once and sat across from him, not as a founder, not as a rescuer, but as a doctor who understood that no title mattered while a father waited. "You could have made him smaller," she said quietly. "After what he did." Ethan looked toward the surgery doors. "My daughter was watching." Claire nodded, and that answer seemed to settle somewhere deep in her. When Naomi finally appeared, her surgical cap loosened and her eyes wet, Ethan stood before she spoke. "She did well," Naomi said. "She's in recovery." For a moment, Ethan's face did not change. Then his shoulders lowered, as if a weight he had carried for years had slipped to the floor without making a sound. In recovery, Lily slept beneath a pale blanket, one hand resting open beside the bandage tape on her wrist. The folder that had once screamed surgery canceled now lay on the counter with a new stamp pressed clean across the discharge sheet. Surgery completed. Charity fund honored. Ethan touched the edge of the paper, not to claim victory, but to make sure it was real. Claire stood near the doorway. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "this hospital owes you an apology." Ethan looked at Lily before answering. "It owes the next kid a better door." The next morning, Marla was not fired in front of anyone. She was removed from surgical intake and placed under Naomi's patient advocacy training, where every form would begin with a name before a balance. Richard Hale's access remained suspended pending audit, his decisions preserved in logs he could no longer edit. And Ethan Brooks, the night guard in worn boots, returned to the hospital 1 week later holding Lily's hand. Not for surgery this time, but so she could give Naomi a crayon drawing of an elevator with 3 people inside. Claire saw it and smiled. In the drawing, the door was open. No one was left outside. Ethan did not ask for recognition, and Claire did not insult him with pity. She only shook his hand with both of hers and said, "You reminded us what this place was built for." Ethan gave a small nod, his quiet eyes moving to Lily as she leaned safely against his side. The hallway fell into a gentler silence then, not the silence of guilt, but the silence of people finally understanding. Some miracles do not arrive with thunder. Sometimes they begin with a tired father holding a door, a child holding a folder, and dignity standing long enough for justice to find the light.